Hello and welcome to the Art of Being Human. On the last segment, we completed almost everything that I have to say about disappointments, but the one thing that we did not complete were the stages of grief that go along with it. And I did explain that whenever you have a separation or whenever you have a loss, that you have a kind of grief that goes with that. And the grief can be very intense. It can be anything from losing a person or being diagnosed with an illness, so you lose yourself because you have an upcoming death, or you're disappointed because you didn't get a job, or your friends moved away. Whatever the disappointment is, the stages of grief are about the same. They might have a little bit of a difference between them, but not a whole lot. So if you are in a stage of grief or in a stage of disappointment, which in a sense is a form of grief, at least to my way of thinking, I want to go over what the stages are. So we'll begin. As in any kind of grief process, your first step is denial. And denial would mean this really didn't happen to me. I really didn't get diagnosed with that illness. I really don't have cancer. This is just a mistake and it doesn't happen. It didn't happen. My friend really didn't move. And you just try to deny the fact. And it's just such a shock sometimes to hear what it is that you're disappointed about. Or it's such a shock to hear what it is that you're grief-stricken about that denial just kicks in. It can't be, it can't be. My friend didn't die, I just saw him this morning. He was fine. The accident couldn't have happened, he must still be alive somewhere. And on it goes. This can be a very difficult part. And in fact, in diabetics, there is grief when you find out that you are diagnosed with this illness. There's grief and there's denial, and usually people will say, well, you know, I've got it a little bit. But having diabetes a little bit is like being a little bit pregnant. You either have it or you don't. You're either pregnant or you're not. So you have to come to grips. It takes, I've been told, it takes about 6 weeks to come to grips with the fact of an illness if you have it, because you feel there's something wrong with me, there's something wrong inside my system, and I just don't feel right about it. But there's that whole stage of adjusting to an illness or even adjusting to a disappointment that you have to handle. So first denial, then anger. Why do I have to have it? I shouldn't have it. Why does it have to be me? Why does it have to be now? Why does it have to be this? And on and on and on it goes. So you ask the questions, and usually the questions are asked in anger. If you have lost a loved one, you can get angry at the person who's died. You don't have the right to die. I needed you. What do you think you're doing? Now, rationally, you know they didn't have a choice, but it's just the emotional reaction. It is a part of the grief process, and you can expect that whenever you have grief, you can have all kinds of mixed emotions that don't make any sense. And to a rational person, they don't make any sense. But at the time that you are going through grief, and that includes the grief of disappointment, you're not going to be able to be rational because your emotions kick in. I know people think of the human being as being rational, and they tag themselves as being a rational human being. I know I'm a rational human being. I know I think rationally, but in truth, when crisis comes, none of us do, because the emotions kick in. We are very emotional creatures. So we get the anger and we blame ourselves or we blame somebody else. I didn't get the job, I'm disappointed, it's my fault, I'm angry at me, what's wrong with me? And then it's apt to go to the extreme. I'll never do anything right, I'll never be important, nobody will ever love me, and it gets to the point of, well, I want to say ridiculousness, but in the state that you're in, it's kind of a natural state to be that way. But you need to draw yourself away. Don't blame yourself for everything. Don't blame yourself for all your disappointments, because there are a lot of factors that come into play here. Things that you don't foresee, and things that you can't foresee. I mean, I was supposed to go to Ohio and become a doctor. You know, I was going to become a PhD, a psychology PhD, and I was going to go into the perception labs of Ohio State University. The person who was the head of Ohio State University, the perceptual laboratories, wanted me there. And he had been in a seminar, and I had been in a seminar at the same time, and I wrote a book on perception and visual illusions, which I dedicated to him, and dedicated to another professor as well on a different campus at another university. And it just turned out that I could not go. And I can understand, looking in hindsight, it was best that I didn't. But at the time, I thought, well, this just isn't working. I don't understand it. And I had my own share of denial about it. I wasn't really angry, though, because I am a person of faith who believes that when things happen, they happen for a reason. So I knew there was a reason, but that doesn't mean I wasn't disappointed just the same. So you have the denial, and you have the anger, and then you have bargaining. Now, this is maybe more prevalent in a person who has an illness. If I do such and so, then maybe God will spare me. If I lead a healthy lifestyle, if I do good things, maybe God will spare me and I won't die of this illness. Now, I knew a lady, we've lost touch now, but I knew a lady who was a wonderful singer. She could sing like the birds. She was wonderful. And she got an illness that involved her throat. I don't know whether it was throat cancer. I don't remember exactly, but it destroyed her singing and she couldn't sing. And she made a promise to God, if you heal me of this, I will sing for you for as long as I live. And he did heal her, and her voice came back, and she did sing for him. So it's not impossible that sometimes when you make a bargain with God, that he takes you up on it, and he says, okay, I'll heal you. This is what you've promised, now do it. So, I mean, those things do happen, but it doesn't always happen. So you have to realize that bargaining sometimes works and sometimes doesn't work. But it doesn't help you. It sets up conditions so that you can deal with the disappointment a little better. And then after the bargaining, you have depression, where you blame yourself or you blame others for the disappointment. You are depressed because it's not working out, and it doesn't look like it's ever going to work out. Now, in the case of illness, supposing you have cancer or a devastating illness like that, well, you go through those stages. I don't really have it. There's been a mistake in the diagnosis. So that's the denial stage. And then you go through the anger. Why should I have it? Of all people, do you know how busy I am? I can't afford to be sick. I've got too much to do. I'm angry that I would get ill. What's the matter with me that my body would pick this up? So you have those stages of anger. And then you bargain. Well, if I do everything right, if I eat the right foods, if I have plenty of vegetables, if I have plenty of fruits, if I take all my medication, if I exercise regularly, can I control this? And will it go away? And if I do all of these things, will God heal me of this? And then I can just live my life like I want to live my life. That would be the bargaining phase. And I have seen miracles in the bargaining phase, but sometimes those miracles don't come, and you also need to be realistic. It may help, it may not help, but whatever happens, you can deal with it and you can work with it. Then the depression comes in when all of these other phases are gone, and you realize that what you hoped for just is not to be. You have cancer, you have a few weeks to live, that's all you have. And that depression sets in because there seems to be no way outside of a miracle of God to change that. And there may be no way to change it except by a miracle of God. I have had some of my people that I've counseled, their parents have been diagnosed with something like pancreatic cancer. By the time you know you've got pancreatic cancer, your life is practically over. It's an extremely fast-moving illness, and you don't get well from it usually, and you don't have any symptoms until it's too late. And then by the time you have the symptoms, it's too late to stop it. So you get into that stage of depression, but then you work out of it. And what happens is that you go into an acceptance phase. And the acceptance phase is not happy, happy, happy. Oh, I'm sick. Oh, it's all right. Everything's okay. That would be a fake emotion. It's an acceptance of this is the way it is, and this is what I'm dealt, and I'm going to handle it, and somehow it's going to be all right. And I can live with this, and I don't have to be angry, and I don't have to be depressed. So the acceptance is more a lack of the depression, a lack of the anger, a lack of the denial, the acceptance of this is what it is, I'll deal with it, and there's a calmness. A lot of times there's a calmness that goes with it. I know what's going to happen, it'll be okay. Somehow it'll be okay. I may not live, but the end result will be all right. And you can accept what's going on, not so much cheerfully, but with a resolve. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. In a disappointment, a lot of times it's a little like that. You know, you're disappointed and you want to deny the disappointment. Well, I don't understand why I didn't get the job. I don't understand why I couldn't buy the house. And you want to deny it. Maybe there's been a mistake. Maybe I filled out an application wrong. Maybe I didn't do as well as an interview as I should. And that denial, it can be rectified, and it didn't really happen. Things are better than what I thought. And then the anger that comes in, why can't I buy the house? Why can't I get that job? Why can't I do what I want to do? It's important. I should not be denied that. And then from the anger going to the bargaining. If I do this, if I have another interview, if I do something else different, will I have another chance? Let me see if I can arrange. Let me manipulate the situation so I can arrange to have another chance. And this time I'll do better. I'll try more. You know, athletes do that. People in contests do that. They don't want to accept the fact that they haven't made the grade or they didn't make the cut. Let me try it again. And usually they're denied, but it is an attempt to do something again, to change things, so that to make a bargain, to make it so that you will be successful. And then the depression coming in, I didn't make it, I can't do anything about it, I was denied, I won't be able to get the job, I won't be able to buy the house, you know, whatever it is that you're disappointed about. And then the acceptance of, well, this is the way it is. And I've got to live with that. I've got to live with the way that it is. And then you just go on from there. It's a whole process. It takes whatever time it takes. How long can a person be in grief until it gets resolved? And what makes me a little nervous is the people who get into an exaggerated grief, or a grief that's complicated because they can't resolve it and they get stuck in the grief process. It is possible to get stuck in the grief process so it doesn't resolve like it should. And when that happens and it doesn't resolve, you can be stuck in grief for years. And what happens to you is that it affects your health. You do other things, and then the grief and the anger comes out sideways. It comes out against another person, and you don't have you don't have the happiness, and you don't have the joy that you have. You do things, and you do it maybe mechanically, or you do have some success, but it's not really what you wanted. You can't take joy in the fact that something happened, but something good came out of it. And you can't focus on that good that came out of it. I'm a person who believes that things happen for a reason, as I've said before. And you know, if you're a person of faith, the Bible says that all things work together to good to those who are called according to his purpose. Now, for those who are called according to his purpose, so this is a promise that's kind of limited to people of faith. If you have faith, everything works out as it's supposed to because God makes sure of it. And no matter what, God makes all things to work out for good to those who are called according to his purpose. And so if you are a person of faith, you know in some way, shape, or fashion, it's going to turn out to be all right. I saw a wonderful television show, and it was narrated by actually Ronald Reagan, and he was talking about his life. And he was saying, these things happened, and I wanted this to happen, but instead this happened. But if this hadn't happened that way, then this wouldn't have happened. And he went through from one thing to another thing to another thing to another thing, all through his life. Because this happened, this happened. Because this happened, this happened. Because this happened, this happened. And he related all the way. It was very fascinating the way he did it. It wasn't boring at all. And what happened finally was, he said, if all of these in total did not happen the way that they did, I never would have met Nancy. And so therefore I look back, and I'm glad that things happened the way they did, because what would have happened if I hadn't gone through this, what would have happened had I took another turn, I would have missed out on meeting Nancy. And that was kind of how he ended the show. I love Nancy, she's my wife, and none of this, all of the good things that have happened with us together would have happened had I done something else different. So all things do work out for good. If you're a person of faith, they always do. And so that should help you a lot with your disappointment, because if you can believe that, then you know how bad the disappointment is, something good will happen to it. Had I gone on and become a PhD in psychology at Ohio State University, I probably would have been there still. But I never would have been a minister, and I never would have done the things I've done since. So I count myself really fortunate that sometimes what my deepest desires were, which was to be a PhD psychologist at a Midwestern university, didn't come to pass, because if it had come to pass, a lot of good things that have happened to me since would not have happened. And so we do have to consider the fact that we don't know the whole scheme of things. We don't know what we're headed for. We don't know what good is going to come out of our disappointment. But if we can understand that there will be good that comes out of our disappointment, then it's a lot easier to handle. You know, I was teaching a student, I'm going to close with this because we don't have too much time left, and I was working with a student who was suicidal. I'm not giving you any private information. I'm not divulging anything that's confidential when I say this. But I intervened 3 times and saved his life. And this was at a university outside of the state. And he came to the conclusion that everything that happened to him that made him depressed made him a better person and a more creative person. And he wrote beautiful poetry. And when we got through and I worked with him enough, we kept in contact even after I left that university to teach somewhere else. I still kept in contact with him. And he turned out all right. And he could look back and say, these things happened, I was deeply disappointed. But see what's happening to me now that's so much better, so much better. There was an athlete that was on a television show that said, whatever your fears are, whatever your disappointments are, embrace them. Don't just run away and hide, embrace them. Because you will find that it's so amazing on the other side. When you get past it, lots of good things can happen. So I give you that word of encouragement. I'm not going to go any further. We will be doing worry and guilt, and then I'm going to get into shame, anger, grief, and all of that, different types of emotions. And then when we finish with that, I'm going to go into a special unit on forgiveness. I've been asked 2 or 3 times to do it, and I have full intention to do it. Forgiveness, which is so important. And then after that, we'll go on to some other things that I have planned as well. So I hope you're enjoying this, and I realize that a lot of people need help and they can't afford to get it. And it's just my prayer that the people who need this will be seeing it, and they can apply apply it to their own lives. I'm not your therapist, and you're not here with me for me to give you therapy, but I might be able to point you in a different direction and give you some knowledge that'll help you out as you go through your own struggles. So we'll close it here, and please join me next time.